Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to all my blessed beloveds out there in video land. You're watching Living and Thriving with Rustie, and I'm Rustie. Today's guest is, I can't remember. Oh, that's embarrassing. I want to say Jeffrey. Let me see. Hold on one second. Who do we have up next? Joseph Holmes. And Joseph is going to call us from the Pacific Ocean time. I'm very excited about that. We're going to learn more about Joseph, what it means to be Joseph, what he likes to do, and what makes him ooey gooey on the inside, because here, that's all that matters. Hey, Joseph. You ready?
Hi, Rustie.
Hi, buddy. You got to turn on your video?
There we go. All right.
How are you?
Good.
Living the dream?
I am.
Good. Well, welcome to Living and Thriving. Joseph, who are you? What do you do, and what makes you you?
Well, I'm a PTSD disabled combat veteran and a survivor of childhood sexual, physical, emotional abuse. And what makes me unique, I think, is I tuned into my angels, and the angels are all around us. And so if you're willing to tune into them, you can hear them. They talk to you, and they talk to you in different ways. For example, I invoked Wayne Dyer last night, and I got up at 2 in the morning, and I went looking at my bookshelf, and there was his book. And in the book, I just turned to a page in the book, and it was exactly what I needed to hear. So
I love it. So what part of the military were you in?
I was in the Army.
Okay.
Vietnam. And I have I encourage people from listening to my story. And some people say, well, I can't see angels, and or maybe I don't believe in angels, but you don't have to. All you have to do is believe in following your heart, listening to your heart. I hear my angels through my heart. And now, if you want to call that intuition, and if that works for you, then call it intuition. But find what works for you in order for you to live your dream.
So let's talk a little bit about your PTSD. Was that from the military, or was that post, or a combination thereof?
Well, I think it was probably a combination, but I'm not a psychiatrist, and I've been told it was strictly from Vietnam. But even when you have a condition, something like PTSD, and then you go to war, and maybe the PTSD originally wasn't really affecting you much, but then you go to war, and it exacerbates the whole condition. It's kind of like a workers' comp situation. You know, if somebody has a back injury and they perform and maybe they had that since they were a teenager, and they get this job and they hurt their back because of the job, well, they exacerbated that condition. But just because they had that condition as a teenager doesn't mean they cannot be compensated for what happened at their work site. So it's the same thing with PTSD.
Yeah, I too have PTSD, so I feel you on this. There was a time period where PTSD was solely equated with survivors of military experience. Right. And then we slowly started realizing that child abuse and domestic violence and car accidents can even give you PTSD. Sure. It's just holding on to that trauma in some way.
Well, I believe even witnessing violence on TV.
I think TV is horrible. So if you've ever seen any of my show, every episode, I'm telling you, get rid of cable because it's just poison. But that's me. So I love the fact that you've taken your experience and you've turned to the angels. I am a spiritual life coach, and I work with angels as well. And some people think it's woo-hoo, and other people do it every day when they go to church and they pray, and
Sure.
it's just a different method to the same sure. Quietness and listening, right?
Well, I didn't have much choice. My mom was a first generation Irish Catholic, and she wasn't a practicing Catholic. But we went to church occasionally, but I wouldn't call myself a religious person. And I am spiritual. And every summer when I was a kid, we lived in San Diego. We would drive over to Phoenix to visit my grandparents, my cousins. And every summer on the way home, we would take a side trip. And this one summer, our parents decided to stop in Nogales, Arizona. Now, I was 7 years old, and for me, Nogales was cool because it had a town right on the other side of the border with the same name, Nogales, Mexico. I just thought that was cool, right? Well, my parents wanted to go there for the Greyhound racing. But anyway, we pulled in the Nogales late at night, and so we all just went to bed. And then the next morning, I woke up, and I had two brothers. So everybody was already up, getting ready to walk over to breakfast. And I was lying in bed. And this feeling of peace, I call it grace today, Mary Magdalene's grace, because I know what it is today, but at the time I didn't know. It's just a feeling of peace that entered the crown of my head and swept through my body and out my feet. And I wasn't scared because it felt really good. I mean, it was, but I didn't tell anybody about it because I didn't know what it was. And so I get up eventually and get ready, and we're walking to breakfast, and we're waiting at the street corner to cross it for the light to turn across. And it happened again, the same thing. And I didn't know till just a few years ago that was the grace of Mary Magdalene. And what I want to emphasize to your listeners is when you start living your dream, you're going to have doubts and fears, and that's what stops most people are your doubts and fears. And so Mary Magdalene, when she started dictating her poetry to me, I started having doubts. And so my original doubt, I got a burning bush. I mean, and this is my most popular book, The Power of Angels, Volume 3, but on the back is a picture of a woman named Angelina. And when Mary Magdalene first came to me in December of 2012 and started dictating this poetry in April, I started having serious doubts. I said, oh, come on. People are going to think I'm crazy. These aren't coming from Mary Magdalene. So I gave her an ultimatum. Now, by the way, she's waking me up from December to 2012 to this very day. She wakes me up at around 2 a.m. every morning and dictates her poetry to me. So this is happening every morning, right? And in April, I just give her an ultimatum. I say, I want something concrete that nobody can refute, that these are really coming from you. So a day went by and nothing happened, right? Then a week went by and nothing happened. So a month went by and nothing happened, but the poetry is still coming through. So I kind of forget about it. And then in July, a few months later, she says, I want you to publish these. So I'm thinking, well, okay, if I publish these, I better get some reviews from people who don't know me, right? So I went on this website that has hundreds of people providing different services. And I'm just going through the pictures real fast. I land on this picture of Angelina. So I stopped, and I didn't know her at the time. I stopped and I sent her an email. I said, I have some poems. That's all I told her. I have some poems I'd like you to give me a review if you wouldn't mind. I'll pay you for your time to read them. And she wrote back and said, well, no, that's not what I do. So you would think I would just move on, right? But I stayed with her and went back and forth a few times. So finally she says, okay, send me some. And I'll tell you what I think, right? Now, go back to December when Mary Magdalene first started sending these poems. I asked her in December, I said, do you mind if I call you Maggie? I said, I know Maggie's not a nickname for Magdalena, but I just, next to Melissa, I've always loved the name Maggie. And she said, sure, you can call me Maggie. So, okay, so in July, I'm talking to Angelina, right? She asked me to send her the poems. I send her, when I send her the poems, that's when I tell her the story about Mary Magdalene, me calling her Maggie, right? Because at the time we were calling the poems Love Notes from Maggie. And the next day she writes back. She says, Joseph, says, I have to tell you something. Says, you're not going to believe me, so I'm going to send you proof. She says, I love these poems, but I have to tell you, people know me today as Angelina because that's what my father wanted to call me. But when I was born, my mother, my legal name is Mary Magdalena.
Ooh, ooh, goosebumps.
Yeah, right. I still get goosebumps when I tell the story. And she said, she said, when I was growing up in Greece, she said, my best friends called me Maggie. And I go, wait, I said, wait a minute. Maggie's not, because I wanted to, Maggie's not a nickname for Magdalena, is it? She says, no. But one day, one of my friends called me Maggie, and I loved it. And from that point on, and she sent me a copy of her passport to prove it, because she said, you're not going to believe me. And so, and then the day after that, Maggie, I call Mary Magdalene Maggie, she sends me this poem. She says, Joseph, when things like this happen, it is magical and fun. Angelina to Magdalena to Maggie. Who would have thought? And from across the sea. And we even look alike. So run, my dear, and jump and sing. That when you look at her, you are seeing me. Isn't that beautiful?
Oh, that's beautiful.
But that's so these doubts and fears, right? So, but what I want to emphasize to your listeners is it doesn't matter. You would think after that, right? I would never have any doubts again, but that's not how the ego works, right?
That's not how human works.
Right, or the humans, right? So a few months later, I'm having a few doubts, not like originally, but just a few doubts. And this time, but at this point, after the burning bush with Angelina, I don't make any demands on her. But when a doubt comes in, she just, so one morning she said, look up Carlos Castaneda. I'm thinking, Carlos Castaneda, you know, I'm an anthropology major, right? Or I have a degree in anthropology. And so Carlos Castaneda, for people who don't know, wrote these books, The Teachings of Don Juan, and it's about a Mexican Indian shaman who takes Carlos under his wing and teaches him all these things about the quantum world. And the big thing about Carlos, I mean, his books became international bestsellers. But the thing is, the criticism is that he made that stuff up. Right? And Carlos' main point to that was, no, I didn't make it up. I met Don Juan at the bus station in Nogales, Arizona. So I knew all this stuff, and I'm thinking, why is Maggie asking me? I already know just about everything about Carlos, right? So I'm reading, I Google it, and I'm reading, okay, I know this, and on the sidebar, there's a little story with a headline that says, I can confirm the meeting with Carlos and Don Juan at the Nogales bus station. So that's something interesting. So I click on that. And this guy is talking about he was traveling in Mexico and he knew Carlos. He was traveling in Mexico, he got sick, and instead of crossing over into the United States, he stopped to recover just over the border from Nogales, Arizona. He said if he had not stopped to recover, he would have missed that meeting at the bus station. So he recovered. He went into Nogales. He was at the bus station and he saw Carlos with Don Juan. The name of the town that he recovered in, which is a suburb of Nogales, Mexico, is Magdalena. So that's how your angels work, right? When you start having doubts, they give you these little, and she told me when you were in Nogales with your parents and you felt that wave go through you, she said, that was me.
Mm.
So what I want to emphasize is, just deal with the doubts and fears, right? And I believe millions of people, Rustie, millions of people have angel stories, right? They just don't say anything about them because they're afraid of being ridiculed or
Yeah.
labeled, right? And so if you can start coming out of your angel closet, right, and start talking about your angel stories, that lays the groundwork for healing from trauma, PTSD, whatever, right? Which leads into discovering what your purpose is, what your gift is here on earth. And then if you can start sharing that gift, and as you start sharing it, the doubts and fears come up, and just deal with the doubts and fears, the way that makes sense, to you. I mean, everybody deals with them differently. I guess that answered your question.
A little bit.
Kind of long about way.
No, that's good. It was beautiful. And I love
Okay.
reading a lot of what Don Juan talks about. So it's a nice segue to what we're talking about, because I can't remember which book it was. I couldn't finish it. His mom died in the book.
Okay.
And just crushed me, but it was soul searching, and that's what we do. I think as humans, we flounder in our meat sack, surfing this huge rock. And in a lot of ways, we isolate ourselves from the greater messaging. And obviously, Mary likes to play with your anthropological side and give you little clues and mysteries. I don't know what more to say about that. I just think it's beautiful. What a wonderful way to live the rest of your life, writing poetry from Mary.
Yeah. It's the way. Actually, the way it all started was 1988. I went over to visit a friend. He was a Reverend John Lawrence, and he was in his 90s at the time. And I just knew him from seeing him on the weekends. And he asked me to come over to his apartment. He wanted to read my aura. I never had my aura read. So, and I liked John. I wanted to get to know him more. So I went over. It was a Sunday morning. And we sat down to meditate. And while we were meditating, we had a coffee table between us, so we were facing each other. And while we were meditating, he kicks the leg of the coffee table. And, he's 90 years old, so I wanted to make sure he was okay, but I didn't want to disturb the meditation. So I kind of just opened my eyes a little bit. And he was like, when you see a ghost, your eyes are white. He was looking above my head like he had seen a ghost. But I knew he was okay, so I just closed my eyes and we kept meditating. And then he started reading my aura. And I was really disappointed. Right? I mean, I'm thinking, God, anybody can say this stuff, right? But, I was cool. I didn't, I just listened to him. But anyway, when it was time for me to leave, he excused himself and he came back and he handed this to me. And now I'm not religious, it's a crucifix, but so I didn't know what to make of it. But he said, this is what I saw hovering above your head. He said, well, it represents what I saw. He said, I want you to keep it. And, 1988, and I still carry it with me. Well, I went out, I left and I went out to my car. And when I got to the car, you know how you get in, you close your door, right? I closed my door and bam! I was encased in a bubble of white light.
Hmm.
And it was like 3 feet off the ground. And Rusty, I cannot tell you how I got home. But I got home, when I got home, I sat down to eat. And I took a fork full of food and I brought it to my mouth. And that's about as close as I could get. This bubble of white energy was so rarefied that the vibration of the food just couldn't penetrate it.
Yeah.
So it lasted for a week. I couldn't eat solid food for a week. But that's how it all started, with that white light. Well, consciously, right? I mean, it started in Nogales when I was a kid, but I wasn't conscious at the time of what that was.
So at that time period, I know that it was very difficult to find information on what you were going through. And it was even more difficult to say, oh, by the way, a beam of bright white light
Right,
shipped me home safely.
right.
You know, because people would be like, ooh.
Mm-hmm.
How did you combat that? Like, how did you find the resources necessary so that you could work with it, adjust to it, heal through it?
Well, at that time, I remember, uh, I think Danny and Brinkley had a book, Saved by the Light, and Betty Eady, I think her name was, uh, had a book about the light. So the white light, you know, a few people had published books about the white light. And that, you know, at the time was considered like the ultimate, right? And the ultimate spiritual experience. Well, that was 1988. 1993, I was at this 1 week workshop, this deep breathing workshop. And we were doing a session at night. The lights were out. Maybe 15 of us were lying on our backs on the floor. And we're doing this breathing. And the facilitator said, okay, we're going to turn the lights on in about 10 minutes. So prepare yourself. And at that time, I saw, well, just before that, a few minutes before that, I saw this pair of eyes above me. I thought they were my mom's because she had died a few years earlier. When he said, we're going to turn the lights on in 10 minutes, the eyes expanded, and it was Mother Mary. And for 10 minutes, she just beamed me with beams of gold and white light. And, you know, it felt good. I didn't know the reason for it at the time, but then 2 nights later, I had an out-of-body experience where I went into what I call these light regions. And it made the white light that I had experienced in 1988, and made that look like kindergarten stuff. These, what I call light regions, were just areas of rarefied light. And we came upon the light of Mary Magdalene, which I didn't know was her at the time. But my guide said, you cannot go there. I said, why not? I want to. He said, no, you'll combust. So I came back into my body. And for 5 solid months, Rusty, I was in this state. Well, I shared it with a Catholic one time. He said, oh, yeah, you were in a state of rapture. Okay. Because I didn't know how, we don't have the syntax for a lot of this stuff, right?
Right, right.
So, yeah, I was in a state of continuous 5-month state of rapture. I couldn't work. I'd go into a supermarket. I'm kind of a quiet, reserved person. I'd go into the supermarket without warning. I just burst out with laughter, this joy. And people would stop and look at me, like, you know. And so then I came out of that. And then a few years later, that's when Mary and Maggie came to me at the Mission San Luis Rey in Oceanside, California. And that's when they healed me of my molestations. And that's when I began. I never told anybody about my molestations. So I was in my 40s and they healed me. And after that point, I started talking about them, writing about them. And then a few years later, after that, that's when Maggie came to me and started dictating the poetry.
Now, were your molestations by someone you knew, or was it a neighbor, or was it a family member? Do you
What?
remember?
Oh, several different people. Um, uh, the first time, you know, it's like PTSD, right? You think for the longest time, I thought, well, I was in Vietnam, but I didn't have to shoot anybody. So I wasn't in combat, right? But after getting therapy on this, I realized, no, you were in combat because we were actually mortared 2 or 3 times a week, you know, and we had to pull guard duty and all sorts of things. But I realized that when I was maybe 6 or so, I was at the Navy hospital getting a shot for something. But there was this, I just remember her as a big, obese nurse. And she made a sexual comment to me. And I realize now that that's molestation. You don't actually have to touch a person. But with somebody in that authority, you know, anyway, so that was the first time. And then I was molested in the Seattle Public Library. You know, but, and then I was molested several other times by other people. But
So Joseph, it's a tough note to change gears, but we're running out of time.
sure.
I want you to show us your book again, please.
Yes. It's you can get it on Amazon. It's called, now I have 45 books on Amazon.
Wow.
So to get this is the most popular. If you get this one, just in the search bar, go to Amazon, and in the search bar, put The Power of Angels, Volume 3. If you don't put Volume 3, angels is a real popular subject, and you get all
Back to
kinds
that
of them.
syntax.
But if you put The Power of Angels, Volume 3, it'll come right up, and you'll see it. So it looks like this.
Love it.
And then Angelina's on the back.
Yay. Joseph, thank you for all that you do for everyone out there. And I love the poetry. I'm so grateful for you and your journey. And I'm grateful for your honesty in regards to why your journey is so important for all of us to hear.
Yeah, well, and I thank you for what you're doing.
Thank
We
you.
need more people like us.
Amen. Do they ever? We need to like multiply. I don't know. The one time that I would actually think cloning was appropriate.
Okay.
Take care, Joseph.
All right. Thanks, Rusty.
Bye, sweetheart.
Bye.
You're watching Living and Thriving with Rusty. I'm Rusty, and I get to do this. I get to travel all over the world, meeting amazing people with amazing stories. And Joseph, he has my heart because I too am a lover of angels. And I think that when you quiet down and you listen and you allow, you can have quite a great conversation with those above. Know that you're loved. Know that you're beautiful. Know that doing something kind means so much to the person who is receiving, on the receiving end. Just like you like to feel good, make somebody else feel good today, because it's so important. We need more of that too. Until next time, take care.